Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Luigi, Director of DeFi at Aave Labs. Very excited for the crowd that we have here today, just like John mentioned. We also have a great panel. Stani from Aave, we have Hatashi from StakeDAO, and Mounir from Paraswap. Like to dive right into it, use the hour well. And I'd like you each to kind of introduce yourself at a high level. And one thing I like to just toss in there is explain the first time you bought crypto, what year it was, and what you bought first. I think it's an interesting story for some people. Stani, why don't you go first?
My name is Stani. I'm the founder and CEO of Aave. Aave is a team that deployed the Aave protocol, which is a, well, some of you all know, but some do not know, so I will explain it very smoothly. It's a way to make your assets grow in value. And pretty much we started by deploying in Ethereum a couple of years ago, and now the protocol is more cross-chain, and especially with the latest deployment in the Avalanche ecosystem. And yeah, as a kind of like a community, there's now over 100 different kind of access points into the protocol in different networks, and the protocol itself is governed by the community, and it's very unique because even the cross-chain components are governed by the community as well. So it's community-owned public good. And yeah, first time I bought crypto.
Yeah, what year was it?
I think it was probably 2016, and I bought some Ethereum to run smart contracts, and that was the time when you had like a paper wallets, and I still find those paper wallets that I used, like it's just like
the passphrases.
Yeah, I used to throw them away into like garbage bin. But yeah, I never was like an investor. Like I never cared to invest, but I think it was just way to build and participate into the ecosystem, and with the governance tokens, it's very interesting how you can contribute in different communities, and they're quite interesting.
Good stuff. So Hatashi, how about you go next?
Yeah, so my name's Hatashi. I'm a core contributor at StakeDAO, Blackpool Rect. So StakeDAO is a bit more of like a yield aggregator, you could say. So we build on top of protocols like Curve and offer best yielding strategies, derivatives. We do yielding NFTs. And yeah, I mean, StakeDAO.org, you guys should check it out. We've got cross-chain deployments as well, some governance, but we're a fairly early project, not as established as Aave just yet, but we'll get there. And the first time that I bought crypto was probably 2019, not as a smart contract dev or anything like that, a bit more just degen crypto exchange. I think it was ETH, like Binance Futures or something like that, as I'm sure some degens might have done in the crowd. So yeah.
Nice. Mounir, how about you next?
Mounir, founder of Paraswap. Paraswap is a liquidity aggregator on the Ethereum blockchain and Avalanche and in other chains. The main purpose of using Paraswap is getting a price that is better than the markets, and that can be a user or a protocol like Aave or a StakeDAO for their end users. Nice use case with Aave is being able to swap interest rates, like going from an asset that delivers a yield to another asset that delivers a better yield. And I think I bought crypto only in 2017, and I knew about crypto since 2013. That's one of my biggest regrets. And yeah, that's about me.
Nice. So, I want to talk a lot about DeFi today at a high level. Go through some things. The first thing I think for DeFi to take that next step is really in UX and user experience. Obviously, it's gotten a lot better since 2017 with new wallets and on-ramps and things like that. But how do you guys, and I'll start with you, Mounir, how do you guys see UX progressing in DeFi going forward for, let's call it the normies or people who are not used to using DeFi to be able to participate?
Yeah, I think Avalanche and all chains that runs in parallel of Ethereum solved a very critical problem that DeFi priced out the retail. It became a whales game, and we saw a shift in our user base where before it used to be very technical questions we were getting, and since we launched on other chains, especially on Avalanche, we started getting a lot of retail, and that's the sign of a large adoption that is starting, and I think this is the future, and also other protocols like lending protocols, StakeDAO, and all others, I think are taking DeFi to the mainstream.
Nice. How about you, Stani? You're building like a lending protocol. There's other things you're doing in Web3. In terms of UX, how do you see that kind of changing going forward, or maybe improving?
Yeah, it's definitely been improving. I think, especially like a few years ago, everyone was focusing on kind of like building protocols that support other protocols and leaving kind of like the user experience for someone else to solve. And I think now, especially with the DeFi and all the growth in DeFi for the past couple of years, there's more and more emphasis on actually bringing more accessibility, because user experience end of the day is about onboarding, getting more people involved, and kind of like bringing more liquidity into the ecosystem. And I think like the reason why there's good user experience, or let's say not good, but like getting better all the time, is that we have so many good protocols at the moment, and the teams that has launched these like front ends for the protocols are actually in a position where you can take that front end and fork it and actually improve it a bit and just make it better. And this is the whole idea of decentralization and building open source software. So essentially, when you have a protocol that everyone can access, use permissionless fashion, build on top new functionalities, features, build better user experience, this is how you get into adoption. And what we did in Aave quite actually recently is we simply gave the front end of the application to the community. It's hosted on the IPFS, and anyone can just take that front end, customize it, even just put like very cool red Avalanche color everywhere, and make it more sleek. And this is how we get more innovation, better UX. It's just opening everything up, and it felt quite good when we gave the front end to the community, because that was the kind of like a last thing left where now the community can actually take the whole ownership from actually users entering, interacting, and the protocol itself. And I think like in terms of like adoption, I think on a protocol level, a lot of user experience will happen like under the hood. I would say like fintechs and neobanks and custodians are one of the potential users of DeFi and abstract that user experience for many users. But I also think at the same time, if you want to reach a lot of adoption, the idea of decentralized finance is that actually you provide this accessibility to anyone, and not necessarily in a way of the users giving up their custody. So I'm in some extent, I think I'm very proud of the UX in DeFi, but there's like still long way to go.
Yeah, decentralizing the UI and other aspects has been something you guys have kind of led from the front on, so that's exciting to see. Hatashi, how about you? I know StakeDAO has really made it a focus for UX. Just when you open up the UI, so it's super important.
I think the points that you guys touched on, creating greater accessibility to DeFi in general and allowing it to be permissionless, anyone can enter, that kind of thing, I totally agree with it. I think Avalanche solved a big problem in terms of fees, as some other networks did as well, like Polygon, but maybe they're not as smooth. And in terms of UX, I think the next stage to onboard more people will be less about getting people to buy into the idea of DeFi, but it will be a little bit more like people that use Facebook, right? They don't necessarily know how the servers or HTTPS in the back end works at all. They don't really care about that, to be very honest. And if we're going to onboard the next million users into DeFi, we need to make it so that it seems like it's not on DeFi. So that's where the UX comes in, I think. So yeah, at StakeDAO we try and make it easy. I see also on Paraswap you guys have like little push notifications like, are you sure you want to make the swap, the slippage? It's about making it easier and probably holding their hand a bit more.
Yeah, I think that's right. And just if anybody in the back, if you guys could just keep it down just a little bit, just because it is a tight atmosphere, but
you just need to say that everyone will get a pop if they will be quiet.
a pop.
Yeah, it goes silent, trust me.
There you go. That's how we get silent. Pull-ups are out. That's a good point. So what's interesting here, and what's exciting about this panel in particular, is Avalanche has a very strong and growing ecosystem of native dApps that are building on Avalanche that we're excited about and that I think a lot of people are starting to use. On this panel, you have 3 non-native dApps that are focusing on integrating and have integrated Avalanche. And so I think mending those communities and kind of getting them together and seeing if we could build something special is what's interesting to me. So, Stani, start with you. In terms of Avalanche and using it, now that you guys have actually developed and deployed on it, what are some things you think need to happen in the Avalanche ecosystem? What are some things that you've enjoyed, that you've seen so far, and what can be better?
I think like at least like what I have been following, like the community and all the development around the Aave ecosystem and kind of like where things are going with Avalanche. I think I'm pretty like satisfied where like things are, because like now there's like a DeFi environment in Avalanche. And this is a kind of like a base layer that you have to get more innovation. And I think kind of like the next step, what will happen is that we will see more developers getting interested in what you can build on top of these protocols, and what kind of a developer community you can embrace. And I think like when it comes to different kinds of networks, I think it's more about culture, community than actually the technology itself. I mean, the technology I'm not talking about like stuff that doesn't work, but let's say like networks that are very very interesting and they have a lot of people supporting them. And in terms of like Avalanche, I think the next thing is that more and more developers will get interested in building innovation that will be a bit more scalable, that maybe building necessarily applications that will be more challenging if, for example, you will build on layer 1 because of the transaction cost. Something, for example, might be on Avalanche you could build very cool interest rate swap protocol where you can actually swap very frequently, and it will make very much sense to do that. And I think like Avalanche itself, the ecosystem has a lot of developers. I'm very kind of like was surprised like how many developers there are, and also like the infrastructure as well, including the bridge that Avalanche has. But also I think what will be next is probably hackathons or something where we will get these individual minds that are now working in the ecosystem coming together and just hacking on different kinds of ideas and building like the future of France there. But also I'm very curious like how it will evolve, because DeFi is just one particular building block. Essentially it's just finance, but there's so many things you can build in Web3 and expand towards. And just attracting people that are culturally curious and curious on innovation and bring their backgrounds into the space, that will just kind of like propagate interesting use cases. And I always say to everyone, like everyone should go beyond DeFi. Like DeFi is just one thing. There's so many things to build.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things you guys are focused on right now, with the social graph and sort of pushing Web3 into social versus just DeFi, right?
Yeah, so Aave has been always kind of like, we try to be as like wide as possible when it comes to what we build. We're not like DeFi builders. I mean, we build the biggest DeFi protocol out there, but at the same time, we want to build more and pretty much kind of like innovate. And our idea of innovation is more about innovate to inspire others to build more and contribute to what we build. And next thing that we're building is a social graph, which basically, I mean, if you go chronologically and look at what's happening in the Web3 is that, first we had quite, scaled, I would say, in terms of like how big Web3 is, decentralized finance. And then now we have a quite vibrant economy of creator economy coming into Web3 with artists, NFTs, and now kind of like the next important link is actually to decentralize the social media, and in terms of like broadcasting the relationship, what people want to show, and having a permissionless, censorship-resistant way to publish to your audience. And I think like we are not like looking to solve like whole idea of social media. Our goal is just to deploy something very, very simple and inspire other developers, other community members to build on top and solve rest of the solutions. And I think something like social graph and social media, it takes years to solve and even longer. But it's just an inspiration that you can build anything in the space if you just want to.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing that social graph on Avalanche. Thanks, Stani. Yeah. Mounir, you built a little bit as well on Avalanche. What are some of the things you noticed either need to be improved or that really excited you? What was your experience like? And really talk to new developers while you're thinking through that.
As an aggregator, we're always looking to maximize the liquidity we're providing. So the more dexes, the better our service gets. The more also custom dexes that are leveraging Avalanche. And I think this is better for the Avalanche ecosystem. So developers, I think they have an opportunity to build something very specific to Avalanche. What we like as well about Avalanche is the bridge, and especially people who were in Ethereum or other chains and wanted to experiment with Avalanche. I love also the incentive on the bridge, so that people they just tried it and they love the experience, and I did it as well, and it was really, really cool. So that's what I say would we expect more, and would encourage more developers to build really new dexes that are really custom to Avalanche, and then can leverage these capabilities that comes with it, and especially this native cross-chain that Avalanche it is supposed to be delivering. And I think that's maybe opening new paradigms that we haven't seen before. And I think Avalanche nailed this thing that it has to be close to Ethereum, unlike other blockchains that tries to build this ecosystem in a closed ecosystem, which may or may not deliver. So we don't know, but we know that Ethereum works, and the best bet is to get the Ethereum community, especially those who can no longer use Ethereum, and can have a chain that has this cross-chain promise, and it's working today. So I think that's what I loved about the experience on Avalanche. It was really smooth for us. Each time we do a new chain, we try to refactor our code so that the next time it's going to be faster. And Avalanche was, I think, the fastest integration. It took us 2 days on the back end and literally 5 minutes on the front end, just filling the gaps of dexes. And we'd love to integrate a new dex that is really custom made for Avalanche and explore also other chains that are on the Avalanche blockchain. I think this will make a huge difference in the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's really made a difference for the users too. I know you guys integrated Curve. That's made stablecoin slippage really low, and I think the users are enjoying that liquidity from all the dexes. So it's really exciting. And then you also mentioned, I think a lot of people forget, but Avalanche is sort of also a layer 0, right? The C chain is just an instance of the EVM. But there's no reason there can't be a WASM subnet or any other subnet that could actually run different VMs in the future. So we'll see that there'll be some innovation in the future there. Hatashi, you guys are focused on this arbitrage strategy. You've also deployed other strategies on Avalanche. Why don't you talk a little bit about kind of what you're deploying and how the users can actually get involved with it?
Yeah, just to touch on the first point, I think one of the beautiful things about Avalanche is its speed, right? And thereby we were able to execute pretty good arbitrage, actually. I'm sure you guys know Julien Bouteloup. I don't want to share too much alpha, but it's going well. And some of the other strategies that we do build on top of is layering on top of the Lego of DeFi. So building on top of Curve, Aave, Paraswap, integrating Paraswap. So I think some of the early strategies that we'll deploy will be quite similar to using major assets. So BTC, ETH, stables, because that's what people feel safe with. But obviously we love this a bit like exotic strategies, arbitrage, APY hunter. So you guys were discussing a little bit earlier about the difference between cross-chain. So imagine a future where the user doesn't actually have to switch chains. They just deposit funds into one vault, and it switches across chains and finds the best return on the market for the user without them having to really understand what to do or change RPC or whatever, abstract some of the difficulty around that. I think that will help onboard new users into DeFi. And in terms of the developers, I think that they should just go out there, move fast, and break things, to be very honest. And Avalanche obviously enables us to do that.
That's a great ethos, I think. So just want to stick kind of like on the same subject a little bit. You guys have obviously all used Ethereum and other chains. You're very familiar with the EVM. Want your thoughts, and I'll start with you, Mounir. On the EVM as a standard going forward, do you feel as though that's going to be the standard going forward now that we have speeds on it, or do you feel that it might be something different? Just kind of what's your thoughts on in terms of a VM and even a scripting language?
In my personal opinion, I think it's gonna stay that way in the short midterm. It's very hard to change because in terms of a network effect theory, we reach a critical mass in terms of developers, and the model proves to be working. Like the proof is having Avalanche and functional from day one, and having Aave, StakeDAO, Curve, and all others literally in few days, maybe a few weeks, and just logistic, but technically speaking, it can take few hours to few days to deploy a whole protocol that took years to build. So I think if Avalanche was not, the C chain was not an EVM compatible, this at least wouldn't happen tomorrow. It would have taken some time. So I feel like the EVM is the JavaScript for blockchains. Yeah. And JavaScript is not a perfect language, and Solidity in EVM is not a perfect language neither, but it's reached this critical mass. So you have this trade-off of the perfect technical, I would say, framework, and the most realistic, and also the time to markets. So being EVM compatible, we are sure that we can deploy and create value for end users, which is at the end what matters. And developers have to adapt with that. But I don't think we're gonna stay like multi or like mono framework. We see other paradigms are being created, and maybe new abstractions of the technical level, like with WASM and eWASM and all of those things, that maybe will help on creating mass adoption on a developer point of view. Because learning Solidity is easy, but maybe we have already developers who master other languages, and they can be productive from day one. But yeah, we don't know when this is going to happen, but what we are sure is that Solidity in EVM is working and has a critical mass in terms of adoption.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. Stani, you've also been involved, obviously, with the EVM a lot. Do you feel similar to Mounir, or is there do you feel like you have a more distinct thought on that?
Yeah, I think the thing is kind of like if there isn't like a EVM, something that we notice is that building DeFi is very, it isn't like, it's let's say this way, it's not the most easiest job in one sense, because there's the security aspect involved, and when you build a protocol that will hold in the future, let's say, well, usually these protocols are designed to maybe capture tens of millions of worth of value, and essentially they're holding now billions worth of value, and probably even trillions in the future. And the challenging part is that when you build these protocols, how do you do it safely and securely, and ensure that you don't have bugs and exploits. And DeFi itself is a very fascinating, I would say, like a field, because at the same time it's a very big sandbox where you have this massive innovation going on, and you have a metaverse where any developer, any part of the world can just come and innovate, build new protocols, test things out, deploy things, and just have fun. And at the same time, the assets and the value is real, and the FOMO is real. And what happens is that many of these protocols might not necessarily be, kind of like a battle tested, or have the same procedures when you build them, or same amount of reviews and audits. And For example, at Aave, we usually go mainnet after 5 audits, 4 or 5, and some form of verification on top of that. And basically, it's just like we're building so complex systems, and these systems are something that never been built before. And I mean, we have very talented people. Our engineers are doing an amazing job, and we're learning every day something new. And it's, I mean, building something like DeFi is a learning curve, like that doesn't ever end, you know. But you know, it's just building all this and having the resources, the human capital, all the audits. It's expensive and time-consuming process even more. And starting to build from scratch is always then completely a new venture. And that means that if there isn't an EVM, it means that you need to build pretty much from scratch, and that will take time and own processes. Instead, when you can use something that already exists somewhere, is battle tested, you don't have to change much of the code base, and you can deploy in a new environment and build that environment, then you know that just speeds things up. But essentially, I don't see why there couldn't be innovation on the actual EVM level, and we see different kinds of EVMs and supports and variations what you can do. So I think like there will be differences in the future, but I think for now, like this kind of like having an EVM is very good to bootstrap applications.
Yeah, no, I could say just working with the developers at Aave was first class the whole way. So, you know, developing in production basically is really difficult to do. So, I want to switch gears a little bit, Hatashi. I want to sort of get into decentralized autonomous organizations a little bit. I know StakeDAO obviously is focused on that. So, where do you see the future of DAOs going forward? Governance is obviously taking a big place in Web3, and I think we'll all see that vision sort of the same way. But where do you think, you know, the DAO will be in, you know, the next few years, and how do you think people, you know, governance will live on chain versus what we see now?
Yeah, I think at present we're quite early in the ecosystem, to be very honest. Like, I know there's $14 billion, $20 billion, however many like huge companies are, well, DAOs are there. They're still pretty far away from the way that work is done in the traditional sense. Yeah. So you don't have, I mean, typically you don't have like a HR department. In our DAO, for example, of course we have Julien, who's a bit of like you know,
HR.
an enigmatic character. Well, yeah.
The fox.
But beyond that, like maintaining a flat structure is useful for ideas. So we have like creatives, we have extremely technical people, but bringing them together into the same room leads to, in our opinion, a better culture and better ideas. So one of the challenges with having a flat structure is that you don't have that direct hierarchy. No one knows like who the boss is, or if there is a HR issue, what happens, or if there's like a trough in performance, or applying for holidays, like little things that perhaps are taken for granted in the traditional world. I think building out robust systems for that while staying true to decentralization and ensuring that, you know, it's on-chain, fair. I think that's one of the main challenges. But if that can't be solved, I think DAOs may have to change in the way they currently function, at least internally speaking, like some sort of structure. But then it gets in the way of ideas and stuff. One of the really cool new things that I was learning at BlizzCon, it's a team building on ZK Snarks on Starkware, and they're building complete like private on-chain signing of transactions. And the use cases of that kind of stuff really fits into what I spoke about. So let's say you have 30 people all building together, and monthly evaluations happen, and based off of that evaluation, you get a reward in governance tokens or fees or whatever it is. If you have it on-chain, you can track the addresses, you know, it creates a bit of friction. But if it's all private, then it doesn't really matter, and it leads to a smoother execution in a DAO sort of organizational level, sure, so to speak. But I mean, I think it's great, man. Like we are building the future here, right? So it's not going to be perfect. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's like looking into the crystal ball and predicting. If I had to say, I think DAOs will overtake the traditional sense of working, because it gives everyone agency over what they want to do. And personally, for me, that's quite important. And I'm seeing extremely talented people move in to the industry, extremely talented people already in the industry. So, I mean, they can't stop us.
Yeah, and I can echo that sentiment. Obviously, Aave is probably one of the most decentralized protocols out there, and that DAO is interesting to navigate, as I learned myself. And I think there's a lot for people to learn. There's a lot of education that has to happen in terms of, having votes in public, right? Kind of getting used to this whole discourse of like making negotiations, relationships all happen in public and transparent. Stani, what are your thoughts on DAOs going forward, having operated or having helped?
Yeah, I think DAOs do set up like a process in the sense that it might be very easy to build things very, very fast in a way that you have a team that just ships code and improves the protocol. But then again, like what you're shipping is kind of like your own team vision, and that's the kind of like not the idea of decentralization. And I think like the idea of decentralization is that you create a community and you have some sort of consensus there, and you do things with a wide approach, wide consensus. And then there are people maybe who are disagreeing, and they can always fork and create a new community and whatnot, and that's totally fine. But the idea kind of like when you have this wide consensus, you're pretty much like always doing the right thing, because you are trying to ensure that you have majority and wide agreement on what you're building for the future. And if the community as a community fails, you can always change, and there's open discussions, and all of this voting behavior and all of this governance is transparent and all the time auditable on chain, and it stays there. So you can always go back and look how things happened and learn from that. And at the same time, it's just the transparency that kind of like brings the power, and the fact that you can vote from anywhere and participate in these protocols. And especially for decentralized finance, this is very big, because now like financial decisions and decisions on economy, there's the like public policy, of course, it's decided by a small amount of people, but also like in the private sector, banks, shareholders, like narrow stakeholders are deciding pretty much how the finance is created in the future, and rest of the people are pretty much using it the way they planned. And now there's a way in very efficiently to participate and change the course in a way that, if you participate in finance, decentralized finance, you can actually decide how things will evolve in the future and how that community works. And this is very big, because it means that actually the users are not only owning these networks, but they're also kind of like they have a say, and in a way that these networks are built for them, and the value capture goes back to the users. This is a very big thing, and I think it takes a bit while. Like once decentralized finance, like which is DeFi and Web3, it's pretty much like a software layer, and you have a cultural layer there. Once like finance completely becomes like DeFi, we understand the power, like how, like why we are here and why this all makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. We've gone for a little bit here. We kept it really high level. You have a lot of the Avalanche community here. Is there anything any of you guys want to say? Just because I do want to leave time for questions. I want people to be able to ask questions. Is there anything you want to say to the Avalanche community? Any future plans? Anything that, how they can use your products better? Mounir, I'll start with you. Obviously, everybody's already using it. But kind of what are your thoughts, or what do you want to say to the Avalanche community?
In our context, there are two kinds of users. We have users who will go to Paraswap.io, which is the front end that delivers the Paraswap service. And right now, half of the other users are other dApps or protocols that are using Paraswap for their use case. It can be either a wallet or another UI that is delivering a different experience, or it can be a bot for any purpose, or it can be a protocol like Aave or StakeDAO that will deliver that. So what we try to do is to keep the integration as simple as possible. So going from one chain to the other, it's just a matter of changing a number, which is the chain ID. And I think developers just have to try it, and I think it's just easy to integrate it.
Hatashi, how about you?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I think we'll be bringing strategies that build on top of protocols like Curve, Aave, integrating Paraswap into enabling the users to use the UI on Avalanche. But I think, to be honest, beyond that, we've got some exciting features planned for the Avalanche universe, so to speak. I think one of the things that we pride ourselves on is offering the best risk-adjusted yield in DeFi. But you don't have to take my word for it. We recently published our Q3 report, so please go check it out. Verify, don't trust, and you'll be able to see and get access to the best returns, hopefully, on AVAX, as well as some exotic packages.
Nice, nice. Stani, how about you? And then we'll go to some questions. I know everybody's trying to grab some drinks, so.
Yeah, I think for me what's interesting is that, as we all are here, and part of the community and interested and curious what's happening in Avalanche and all the projects here, I think like the way to kind of like make a lot of impact is actually to participate in the governance, in the way that governance participation doesn't mean that you necessarily have to vote on things, but just being active member of the community, sharing ideas and also kind of like commenting on things and making proposals in the forum. I mean, essentially, that's the best way to kind of like get your ideas to wider community and also like find people who like what you're presenting and I definitely encourage everyone to just be active community member and participate in any of the governances and not just governances but just like in the products and things that are happening. It's just so fascinating, and you don't need to be you don't need to have a technical background to actually participate. Like Web3 doesn't look in backgrounds; it just looks into ideas and what people are saying and reflects those. It's something that I really recommend for everyone.
Yeah, no, I completely echo that, and it's been a pleasure working with all three of you. But I'd like to leave some room for the audience to ask some questions. Does anybody have a question for any of these guys, or? Yeah, go ahead. Do we have a mic? Yeah, we got one. No, we got one.
Hi, my name is Andrei Anisimov. So the question is like now the default behavior of the protocols that achieve sort of product market fit is to expand in all the like side chains. You go to Polygon, you go to Avalanche, you go to like Arbitrum, whatever. Do you think that there is some value in that, in have this different instances of the protocol with like fractional liquidity? Or do you think that there is an alternative to that, right? To have all the liquidity on one protocol, but have all the bridging and DEX infra developed such that like user can spend their asset on any chain to participate in a protocol on any other chain? Do you think like that's sort of the future, or do you think like keeping like having to clone the instances in different like chains is sort of like how it's gonna go?
I think people like to be in communities, kind of like for Aave and like our community, I've seen like we're very inclusive in the sense that going into a, let's say, into a new network usually means that it's not just a technical deployment, it's actually kind of like exploration to a new community and learning from there and what are the ideas and events that are happening there. And I would say like, I don't think it fractionalizes liquidity because it's just like many of these networks, they have their own kind of users. And it might be because, for example, Avalanche has a lot of users that, for example, they need faster transactions, they need more transactionings or applications that just has to transact more. And at the same time, lower transaction costs just are bring more users, which is more inclusive. And I think, essentially, I don't think it fractionalizes liquidity, and I think it's a topic that we shouldn't be too much scared of. It's something that we've been discussing in DeFi quite a lot, that there's like certain amount of fractionalization that might not make sense, but then kind of like if their value added is that you get more users into the into your project's kind of like ecosystem, it makes a lot of sense to us. And that's the best way to learn from different communities. And I think there will be always people who are part of maybe 1, 2, 3 communities, but they're not part of the 3 other ones. And some people are part of there. And to capture like all the user base, you kind of like have to explore in other places. And I don't know, I love the Avalanche community, so that's another reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can echo that. Also, one thing that's really interesting about the Avalanche community in particular is a lot of the users that we've spoken to actually never tried another protocol prior to Avalanche. And I was surprised to learn that myself. You know, usually you think everybody gets their start from ETH and then they move over. But actually there's a lot of people who joined crypto recently. I got a friend joined crypto recently, and they just went to this chain first for whatever reason. It could be a different one, it could be this one. But I think that's, you know, that only includes more and more people as we go forward, right? Anybody else? Does anybody else have another question? Yeah, there in the back.
Hey guys, thanks a lot for a great talk, first of all. I've got a couple of quick questions if there's time. I'd like to know, first of all, where you're at with institutional adoption and kind of what the narrative is there. I know Stani was saying they launched I think you launched your beta fairly recently, so if you could give us an update in terms of institutional adoption, what's happening since the kind of market crash. And then secondly, I'd love to know a little more around regulation. I know Julian was talking the other day about kind of the 5D chess that's going on at a top kind of level. So I'd love to hear from you guys what your kind of perspective is on the regulatory side of things, how much pressure you may be getting put on you, and how difficult that is to navigate. If that's cool.
Okay, who wants to? Well, you can take the question.
The regulation question?
Yeah, sure. Have fun. I purposefully avoided it.
I think obviously regulation moves quite slow, right? It comes after the fact. So you've got something beautiful that's being created, and then people start to talk about it more. There's more money, and then governments realize like, oh, either we can make money, someone's gotten wrecked, and they need to, you know, create systems to protect around that. So I think it will come, but it moves slow, and it is slowly ramping on the pressure into the DeFi world, so to speak. But I really think DAOs are a new way of doing stuff, and the old systems will not be able to regulate it properly, and we'll go through peaks and troughs, right? We'll have multiple issues, but in the end, they'll have to adapt to us, I think, and there will be a little bit of a conflict, as there always is. But I think the way that we can propagate that forward is by working together with them. Maybe education is the way. Some people choose to go for like a push route where they're just like, I don't care about governments, I don't care about any of this, my protocol is decentralized, and we'll do DAO to DAO interrelationships. So in terms of direct pressure, it's not my area of expertise. I'll deflect this to Julian, maybe you can DM him on Twitter. But I would say there's a push and a pull, right? Education, or you just completely neglect and build forward. Like for us, we interact a lot DAO to DAO. We spoke to some institutions, but they move a bit too slow, to be very honest. And their way of working is not really the same ethos as we have. So we work with a lot of different DAOs directly, and that's how we solve the demand, so to speak, that could come from institutions. And I can't remember what your other question was, but
well, I think it was on institutions, right? Mounir, I mean, I think your product is probably well suited for that. What are you guys seeing on the institutional front?
Yeah, we saw a lot of interest from institutions on DeFi itself, but we also saw a lot of limitations that those institutions have, that not all of them can tomorrow start trading on DeFi and supplying liquidity to Aave. First, what I noticed is there is a psychological barrier, because those big guys always have the habit of having a third party, like counterparty, with whom they will be trading. And now you're telling them, well, the counterparty is a smart contract or is code, and that's hard to admit when you're doing this financial business for the last 50 or 100 years. So that's the first barrier. But the second one sometimes is very justified. It's purely regulatory, where they don't have the means to trade on DeFi. So in Paraswap, we have what we call Paraswap Pool, which is a network of professional market makers. And that's like the drug pill to get them into DeFi, where they will have access to DeFi tokens, liquidity, without really trading with DeFi. So will be trading with a counterparty, and they will have exposure to DeFi. And the hope is that tomorrow they will be able to go directly to a Uniswap. And the good news is that these guys are exploring some middle ground solutions. For instance, well, maybe we cannot trade on any pool on Uniswap, but maybe we can assign a score on particular pools, so that if all the interactions were clean, given that scoring system, it is possible to trade on Uniswap. So that's the shift we're starting to see, is that it's giving the signs that maybe tomorrow we will see, like, I don't know, a Morgan Stanley trading on Uniswap, like not the same way that we'll be doing it, but in a different way. But it's a great thing, because it's a sign of large adoption, because these guys are representing the large holders, or the majority of say the population that will get into DeFi. So I think solutions like that, I think Aave Pro is also one of the most promising institutional solutions in DeFi. And here we're talking about the technology instead of just DeFi, but it's a bridge, I think, that is necessary.
Yeah, Stani, why don't you talk a little bit about the institutional front?
Yeah, I agree with Mounir. I think like there's institutions already in like in DeFi, and you know there's like certain level of like exposure that institutions can make, and it's like a wide concept. So you know, hedge funds might be more flexible than more like traditional funds, and I think kind of like for us, like we understand that like decentralized finance are here to stay. Like it's just like these flies are like killing me.
He smells alpha.
And I think like yeah, DeFi is here to stay, because you know it's just like a place where innovation tries all the time. It's very difficult to stop something that is like constantly evolving. Everything is public good, and you can take that code, fork it, you know, improve it, and in that sense, things are moving very fast in DeFi, because just for the fact that, you know, there's no moats. You know, you don't have like competitive moats in the traditional financial sense. And this means that, you know, any developer, any part of the world can create the next Aave or the next Paraswap or StakeDAO. And this is good for everyone, because this is something that keeps the innovation going. And this means that, you know, there is market for institutions to participate. There's definitely appetite for that. There's few things involved. You know, one of the things is like security, in the sense that all DeFi is not equal. There's a lot of kind of like experimentations, and some protocols are then more actually kind of like more secure in terms of like how they do their processes, and that's one challenge. And of course, the another one is like how you share keys when you participate into DeFi in a permissionless fashion, or how do you participate in maybe even permission fashion. But then there is kind of like an appetite, what institution can participate. And we noticed this quite early, as we had a lot of discussions with many of the funds, and we created the so-called Aave Arc market, or actually a protocol, because it differentiates from the Aave protocol. It's what Mounir pretty much mentioned. It's a segregated liquidity pool for institutions, where you have this whitelister functionality, which lists, whitelister can be a custodian, it can be a bank, that whitelists the depositors, the borrowers, and the liquidators, essentially creating kind of like market with less of a risk in that sense. And the idea here is that, you know, we let the institutions to practice on this kind of like a model, and then when there's more clarity on their like risk tolerance and what they can actually do, they can then participate into the like permissionless DeFi, which is pretty much what we're building, and it's our vision. So I think like for institutions, everything will make more sense as time passes. especially because things become more secure, protocols become more battle tested, and we just see that this technology is just fucking awesome, you know.
That's right.
That's the thing.
That's right. Look, I want to thank you all, right, for coming, spending time with us, being such good partners, joining the Avalanche community. I think that's all the time we have for the panel today, but you know, you guys are welcome to hang out. We have the happy hour tonight. You got drinks. There'll be some bonfires outside, so let's just all hang out. But I want to thank you guys in particular for being here and being gracious with your time. So let's give them a round of applause and